I finally held the keys to my dream Moscow apartment, tangible proof of years of sacrifice. But those same keys would soon unlock a nightmare of betrayal, meticulously planned by the man I trusted most. The weight of the keys felt different today, heavier, more real. For 3 years, I'd held the phantom weight of them in my mind, a constant motivating pressure. The pressure of a 3-bedroom apartment in the heart of Moscow, a stone's throw from Tsvetnoy Boulevard. It was a dream so audacious I barely dared to speak it aloud. But I'd done it. I'd worked 18-hour days coding for a German tech firm, taken on freelance projects that bled into my weekends, and poured every last kopeck from my grandmother's inheritance into this single magnificent goal. And now, the keys were in my palm, cool metal against my skin, the tangible proof of my sacrifice. The air in the apartment still smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the pale oak floors. This would be my office, with a view of the bustling street below. This would be a nursery, someday. And this, the master bedroom, where my husband Oleg and I would finally have space, would finally be able to breathe. Oleg. He'd been so supportive, my handsome, charming Oleg. "Whatever you need, my love," he'd say, rubbing my shoulders as I hunched over my laptop at 2 a.m. "You're building our future. I'm so proud of you." He made less than a quarter of what I did, working a comfortable but unambitious job in logistics, but he was my biggest cheerleader. He handled the groceries, the bills, the life admin that I was too exhausted to face. He was the steady ground beneath my soaring ambition. We were a team. When he walked in that evening, his face lit up, a wide, boyish grin that always made my heart flutter. He dropped a kiss on my forehead and spun me around in the vast, empty living room. "We did it, Elena," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with emotion. "Look at this place. Our palace. You did it." "No," I corrected him, pulling back to look into his sparkling blue eyes. "We did it." He just smiled and squeezed my hand. Later, as we sat on the floor, sharing a pizza from a box and drinking cheap champagne from the bottle to celebrate, he told me his family was having a get-together at his parents' dacha on the weekend. "A celebration," he declared. "For us, for the new apartment. My mother is already planning the shashlik. They're all so thrilled." I felt a warm glow spread through my chest. His family could be a little old-fashioned, a bit too traditional for my taste, but they had always been kind. The thought of them celebrating my success, our success, felt like the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. Oleg went to take a shower, humming an old off-key pop song, and I was clearing away the pizza box when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the Moscow city code prompted me to answer. "Hello?" There was a hesitant silence on the other end, just the faint sound of wind and distant chatter. "Elena, is that you?" The voice was female, shaky. "Yes, who is this?" It's Anya, Oleg's cousin." My brow furrowed. I'd only met Anya a handful of times. She was quiet, always hovering at the edge of family gatherings, seeming a little intimidated by everyone. "Anya, is everything okay? I'm so sorry to call you. I shouldn't be doing this. Please don't tell Oleg I called you." Her voice was a panicked whisper. My blood ran cold. "What is it? What's happened?" "I'm at the dacha," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Everyone is here. They started drinking a few hours ago, celebrating." "Celebrating the apartment?" I asked, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. "Oleg said you were all thrilled." Anya let out a sound that was half sob, half bitter laugh. "Oh, they're celebrating, all right. Just not in the way you think." I sank down onto the floor, my back against the pristine white wall. The smell of paint suddenly felt cloying, suffocating. "Anya, what are you talking about?" She took a deep, shuddering breath. "Oleg is here. He's with his father and Uncle Sasha by the grill. They think I'm inside helping with the salads. He's had too much vodka, Elena. He's bragging." Bragging. My voice was barely a whisper. "Yes," she said, her voice dropping even lower, as if she was afraid of being overheard. "He's puffing out his chest, laughing. Uncle Sasha was clapping him on the back. He said—" Anya faltered, and I could hear her crying softly. "He said what, Anya? Tell me, please." There was another pause, and then she delivered the words that shattered my world into a million pieces. She recited them like a line from a horror film, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. He raised his glass. He was so proud. He said, "My wife bought a 3-bed in central Moscow. All her savings, all her inheritance. The fool even put my name on everything to make me feel like a real partner. Now I just wait a few months, make it look good, then I'll divorce her and take half." He boasted to them, Elena. He boasted about his plan today. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the oak floor. The sound was deafening in the silent, empty room. I could hear the faint sound of Oleg still humming in the shower, the cheerful, carefree sound of a man who believed he had just executed the perfect heist. The words echoed in my head. The fool even put my name on everything. It wasn't true. I was meticulous. My lawyer had been very clear. My inheritance and premarital assets were to be protected. The down payment was entirely from a protected account. His name was on the mortgage application as my spouse, a formality, but the deed, the title, it should have been solely in my name. My lawyer had insisted. A cold, terrifying certainty washed over me, more powerful than the grief, more potent than the rage. He couldn't legally take half unless he'd done something, unless I had missed something. My eyes darted across the room to the briefcase in the corner, where I had placed the thick folder containing every single document from the sale, every signature, every clause, every official stamp. Suddenly, I wasn't just looking at a folder. I was looking at the scene of a crime. My movements were unnervingly calm, a stark contrast to the hurricane raging inside my chest. My mind, usually a chaotic whirlwind of code and deadlines, had become a silent, cold vacuum. All I could hear was Anya's whispered words and the rhythmic thrum of the showerhead. The fool even put my name on everything. He'd done something. He'd found a way. With trembling fingers, I slid the briefcase towards me. The latches clicked open with a sound like a gunshot in the silent apartment. Inside, the manila folder sat on top, thick and official. "Apartment purchase, Tsvetnoy Boulevard," my neat handwriting stated on the label. A label from a lifetime ago from this morning. I pulled it out, my breath catching in my throat. My hands were shaking so violently that the papers rattled. I had to plant my left hand flat on the floor to steady my right as I began to sift through the stack. Mortgage agreement, bank statements, appraisal reports. Where was it? The final registration document, the Vipiska. The official extract from the state registry that names the legal owner. I found it near the bottom. A crisp, multi-page document covered in official stamps and dense legal text. I skipped straight to the section titled Pravo Obligatal, the rights holder. My eyes scanned the text, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My name, Elena Ivanovna Petrova, should have been the only one there. My lawyer and I had gone over it a dozen times, but it wasn't. There, printed in the same stark official font, was a second name, Oleg Dmitrievich Volkov, co-owner, joint tenancy. A wave of nausea washed over me. I felt the bile rise in my throat, hot and acidic. It was real. Anya wasn't mistaken. She wasn't lying. This document, this legally binding piece of paper, was his weapon, and I had handed it to him. But how? I remembered the day of the final signing. My lawyer was supposed to be there, but he'd called at the last minute, sick with the flu. He sent his junior assistant, a flustered young man who seemed overwhelmed by the sheer volume of paperwork. I had been up for 36 hours straight, finishing a critical project, running on nothing but caffeine and adrenaline. Oleg had been there. My rock. He'd brought me coffee, rubbed my shoulders, and kept whispering, "Almost there, my love. Just a few more signatures and our dream is real." He'd helped the assistant organize the papers into neat piles. "This is for the bank. This is for the registry. This is for your records," he'd said, his voice a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. I remember a moment when the assistant was on the phone with his boss and Oleg had slid a stack of papers in front of me. "Here, honey, these are the last ones for the registry. Let's get them done." I'd been so exhausted, my vision blurring from staring at a screen for 2 days. I'd trusted him. I'd signed where he pointed, my signature a messy scrawl of pure fatigue. He must have swapped the document, the one my lawyer had prepared for one his own lawyer had drafted. He had used my love, my trust, and my exhaustion to orchestrate the greatest betrayal of my life. The sound of the water shutting off in the bathroom snapped me out of my trance. Panic flared. I couldn't let him see this. I couldn't let him know I knew. My ignorance was now my only shield, my only advantage. With frantic, precise movements, I shoved the papers back into the folder, making sure they were in the exact same order I had found them. I snapped the briefcase shut, slid it back into the corner, and forced myself to stand up. I walked to the kitchen area, my legs feeling like they were made of lead, and leaned against the counter, staring out the window at the glittering lights of Moscow. I was watching my own life, my own future, as if it were a movie happening to someone else. Oleg walked out of the bedroom, a towel slung low on his hips, rubbing his wet hair with another. He was smiling that easy, handsome smile. "All good, Lyubov Moya?" he asked, his voice still cheerful. He walked over and wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. His skin was warm and damp, smelling of soap. The scent that used to feel like home now smelled like deceit. I flinched, a tiny involuntary movement. He noticed. "Hey," he said, his voice softening with fake concern. "What's wrong? You look pale. Is it all just hitting you? Feeling overwhelmed?" I closed my eyes, forcing the image of the forged document from my mind. I needed to act. I was a problem solver, a coder. This was just the most complex, most malicious bug I had ever encountered, and I was going to debug it. I turned in his arms, forcing my lips into a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. I reached up and ran my fingers through his damp hair, the gesture feeling alien and rehearsed. "Yes," I said, my voice miraculously steady. "Just overwhelmed. In a good way. It's just so much. This place. It's perfect." He visibly relaxed, his smile returning. "It is perfect," he agreed, kissing my forehead. "And it's just the beginning. Now, about this weekend. You're still up for the dacha? Mom will be devastated if we don't come show off. Show off." The words hung in the air, thick with double meaning. He wanted to show me off, the fool who had bought him his future. And he wanted to show off his prize, the apartment he was already mentally carving up. The dacha wasn't a celebration. It was a victory lap, and I had to be there. I had to see it. I needed to look his family in the eyes, the ones who had clapped him on the back as he toasted to my ruin. "Of course," I said, my smile widening, feeling more like a predator's snarl. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. We have to celebrate our palace, right?" I put a little extra emphasis on the word our, letting it sound like the happy, deluded wife he believed me to be. He grinned, completely oblivious. "That's my girl." He turned and headed back to the bedroom to get dressed, whistling that same tuneless pop song. I stood frozen by the window, my reflection a pale, ghostly image against the dark glass. The warmth from his body lingered on my skin like a disease. He wanted a celebration. He wanted to boast to his kin about his brilliant plan. Fine. I would go to his party, but I wouldn't be coming with a bottle of champagne. I would be coming with a plan of my own. He thought the game was already won. He had no idea I was about to change all the rules. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in deception. I moved through our old apartment, packing the last of our things, with a smile permanently etched onto my face. I was the loving wife, giddy with excitement for our new life. I laughed at Oleg's jokes, asked about his day, and discussed what color we should paint the nursery one day. Each word felt like ash in my mouth. Every touch was a violation. He was more affectionate than ever, constantly kissing me, wrapping his arm around my shoulder, basking in the glow of his supposed victory. He saw my quiet moments not as shock and rage, but as overwhelmed joy. He was so blinded by his own arrogance, he couldn't see the woman standing in front of him was no longer his wife, but a strategist gathering intelligence behind enemy lines. While he was at work on Friday, I made my moves. First, I called Anya. "Please don't hang up," I said the moment I heard her pick up. "I'm not going to say anything to Oleg, but I need your help. I believe you." There was a shaky breath on the other end. "Elena, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do." "You did the right thing," I said, my voice firm. "Anya, I need to know who was there. Who heard him say it?" She listed them off. His father, Dmitri, his uncle, Sasha, his brother, Pavel, and his mother, Irina, had apparently been standing by the kitchen window, close enough to hear everything. The whole inner circle. His cheering section. "One more thing, Anya," I said, my heart pounding. "Is there any way you can record them? If he says anything else this weekend? Anything at all?" There was a long silence. "It's risky, Elena. My parents." "I know. But Anya, he's trying to destroy me. He's trying to steal everything I've ever worked for, everything my grandmother left me." Another pause. Then, "I will try," she whispered. "My phone. I can try to leave the voice recorder on in my pocket, but I can't promise anything." "That's all I can ask," I said, flooded with a dangerous mix of gratitude and adrenaline. My next call was to my lawyer, Mikhail. I didn't tell him I was sick. I told him there was a fire. "Mikhail, it's Elena Petrova. I need to see you, now." He protested, his voice still raspy, but the steel in my tone must have cut through his feverish haze. I was in his office an hour later, the fraudulent deed laid out on his mahogany desk. The color drained from his face as he stared at it. He was a proud man, and this oversight, this catastrophic failure by his junior, was a direct blow to his professional ego. I am beyond horrified, Elena," he stammered, his face pale with shame. "The assistant, he's young, but I never imagined. This is grounds for immediate dismissal and a lawsuit." "Forget him," I said, my voice cold and sharp. "He was a pawn. Oleg did this. He swapped the documents when no one was looking. Now tell me, Mikhail, how do I fix it?" He spent the next hour poring over every document, his initial shock morphing into a focused, clinical anger. He explained the legal nightmare I was in. A joint tenancy agreement is brutal. In a divorce, the asset is typically split 50-50, regardless of who paid for it. Proving fraudulent inducement is possible, but incredibly difficult. It would be my word against his. A messy, protracted, and expensive court battle that I could very well lose. "He thinks he has me trapped," I said, looking out the window at the gray Moscow sky. "Legally, he has a very strong position," Mikhail admitted grimly. "Then we won't fight him legally," I replied, turning back to face him. "Not yet. We're going to fight him with information." I laid out my plan. The dacha, the family, the potential recording. Mikhail listened intently, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. The shame was gone, replaced by the thrill of the fight. This was no longer just a case for him. It was a matter of professional vengeance. "Get me a confession, Elena," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Get me anything. Get me one of them to admit they knew. Get it on tape. If you can do that, we can tear his case to shreds before it ever sees a courtroom." The drive to the dacha was surreal. Oleg was in high spirits, playing loud music and drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. He talked excitedly about the future, about how he was going to build a new banya, how we'd host parties for all our friends. I sat in the passenger seat, a silent passenger in my own life, nodding and smiling, my mind a whirring supercomputer running simulations of the weekend ahead. In my handbag, nestled beside my wallet and keys, was a tiny, high-fidelity audio recorder disguised as a USB stick, a gift from a grateful Mikhail. He had two, one for me, one for Anya, double the chances. When we arrived, the scene was exactly as I had pictured it. The smell of grilling meat hung heavy in the air. Dmitri and Sasha were standing by a massive brick barbecue, glasses of vodka in hand. They greeted Oleg with boisterous backslaps and knowing winks. They greeted me with a new kind of politeness, a patronizing sweetness that curdled my stomach. It was the way one might speak to a prize-winning show dog or a particularly valuable but stupid cow. Irina, Oleg's mother, rushed out to hug me, her embrace feeling like a cage. "Lenochka, my dear girl, we are so proud of you, to achieve so much. You are a true asset to this family." Asset. The word choice was not lost on me. I smiled my brittle smile. "Thank you, Irina. I couldn't have done it without Oleg's support." Her eyes glinted with something that looked like pity. Of course. A man's support is essential for a woman's success. I found Anya in the kitchen, her hands shaking as she chopped dill. She didn't look at me, but as I passed behind her to get a glass of water, her hand brushed against mine, and I felt the small, hard shape of her own USB recorder being pressed into my palm. I closed my fist around it, a silent pact of solidarity passing between us. The afternoon wore on in a haze of forced pleasantries and cheap vodka. I nursed a single glass of wine, needing my wits about me. Oleg, however, was drinking with celebratory abandon. With each toast, he grew bolder, his bragging more thinly veiled. He talked about our investment, our smart financial planning, and the bright future we had secured. His father and uncle would laugh and clap him on the back, sharing conspiratorial glances that made my skin crawl. Later, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the overgrown garden, I found myself alone on the veranda with Irina. She was watching her son, who was now attempting to teach his brother Pavel a ridiculous dance move by the fire. A fond, smug smile played on her lips. "He is a good boy, my Oleg," she said, not looking at me. "Always so clever. He knows how to get what he wants. He takes after his father." This was it. A flicker of opportunity. I activated the recorder in my pocket. "He is very ambitious," I replied carefully, my voice full of practiced naivety. "I can barely keep up with him. This apartment, it was all so fast. I just signed the papers he put in front of me. I trust him so completely, you know?" Irina turned to me, her eyes sharp and assessing. She placed a cool, dry hand on my arm. "That is good," she said softly. "A wife should trust her husband. It is a man's duty to handle such important family business. You did the right thing, Elena. Letting him add his name to the deed protects the family's investment. It was a very smart move on his part." My heart stopped. It was there. A direct admission. She knew. She knew he had manipulated the paperwork. The recorder in my pocket felt like a ticking bomb. I just needed to keep her talking. "His investment?" I asked, feigning confusion. "But the down payment was all from my inheritance." Irina's smile tightened. "My dear, when you marry into a family, what was yours becomes ours. And Oleg has invested 3 years of his life in you, in this plan. It is only fair he gets his reward." Her words were a physical blow. The air rushed from my lungs. But before I could respond, Oleg came bounding up the steps to the veranda, his face flushed with alcohol and triumph. "Mama, Elena, come! Pavel is about to make a toast to the happy couple, to the new homeowners," he slurred, grabbing my hand and pulling me towards the fire pit where the rest of the family was gathered. He was beaming, a conquering hero surrounded by his adoring subjects. He pulled me into the center of the circle, wrapping an arm possessively around my waist. Pavel raised his glass, his eyes twinkling with drunken mirth. "To Oleg and Elena," he shouted. "To Oleg and Elena," the family chorused. Oleg leaned in and kissed me sloppily on the cheek, his breath reeking of vodka. He whispered in my ear, his voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. "See, my love? They all love you. It's all working out perfectly." Then he lowered his voice to a conspiratorial murmur, meant for my ears alone, a final arrogant twist of the knife. "Just a few more months of this, and then you and I can go our separate ways. Don't worry, I'll be generous. You won't be left with nothing." The world narrowed to a single sharp point of focus, the foul, sour warmth of his breath against my ear. Just a few more months of this. His words were not a threat, but a promise, a casual, confident declaration of my impending destruction, delivered with a drunken kiss. In that moment, the carefully constructed dam of my composure didn't just crack, it vaporized. The calculating strategist was gone, replaced by a woman pushed beyond her absolute limit. The USB stick in my pocket felt like a shard of ice against my thigh. I had his mother's admission. Now I had his. It should have been enough. I should have smiled, played along, and walked away with my victory secured. But looking at his smug face, surrounded by his cheering, complicit family, something primal and furious ignited within me. He wasn't just going to lose, he was going to burn. I pulled back from his embrace, my movements slow and deliberate. The smile I gave him was pure ice. "Generous? Oleg, darling, you have no idea," I said, my voice dangerously sweet. The noisy chatter around the fire pit faltered. A few heads turned our way. Oleg's drunken grin wavered, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He wasn't used to this tone from me. I took a step back, creating a small stage for myself in the flickering firelight. I raised my wine glass, mimicking his brother's toast. "Actually, I'd like to make a toast of my own." My voice was louder now, clear and ringing in the sudden quiet. All eyes were on me. I could feel Anya shrink into the shadows, a silent, terrified observer. "To family," I began, my eyes sweeping over the assembled faces, Dmitri, Sasha, Pavel, Irina, to a family that values investment above all else, a family that understands the importance of a smart move. I locked eyes with Irina. A flicker of panic crossed her face as she recognized her own words being thrown back at her. Oleg took a step towards me, his hand reaching for my arm. "Elena, what are you doing? You've had too much wine." I sidestepped him gracefully. "Oh no, my love. For the first time in a very long time, I am completely sober." I turned my attention back to the silent, watching crowd. "I want to thank my brilliant husband, Oleg, a man who takes after his father." I nodded towards Dmitri, who was staring at me with a thunderous expression. A man who knows how to get what he wants, a true planner. The air was thick with tension. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. "He has been so supportive these past 3 years while I worked myself to the bone. He told me he was building our future. And he was. He was just building a very different future than the one he sold to me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small USB stick. I held it up between my thumb and forefinger, letting it glint in the firelight. Modern technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it? For example, this tiny little thing. It's a voice recorder, and it has the most fascinating conversation on it. A conversation from just a few minutes ago, where my dear mother-in-law, Irina, explained to me that a wife's inheritance becomes family property. She praised Oleg's smart move in tricking me into signing a joint deed. She called my life's work the family's investment. Irina let out a choked gasp, her face turning a blotchy, mottled red. Dmitri took a threatening step forward. "What is the meaning of this?" "The meaning," I said, my voice dropping to a low, venomous growl, "is that the game is over." I turned my full attention to Oleg. His face was a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. The drunken flush had been replaced by a deathly pallor. "And Oleg," I continued, "your little whisper just now? The one about generosity? And going our separate ways in a few months? I got that too. Crystal clear." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. along with your toast from last week, the one Anya was kind enough to record for me, the one where you called me a fool and boasted to your kin about your plan to divorce me and take half." Anya, hearing her name, let out a small, terrified squeak from the shadows. Uncle Sasha swore loudly in the darkness. The entire family was frozen, caught in the headlights of my incandescent rage. Oleg stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The charming, confident mask had crumbled, revealing the weak, pathetic little boy underneath. "Elena?" "No. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand everything," I said, taking a deliberate step towards him. I was close enough now to see the sweat beading on his upper lip. "I understand that you are a thief, a liar, a parasite. And your family? They are your cheerleaders. You stood here last week and toasted to my ruin, and they clapped you on the back." I looked at Dmitri. "You raised a con artist." I looked at Irina. "You enabled him." I looked at Pavel and Sasha. "And you celebrated him." Then I looked back at Oleg. I wasn't smiling anymore. "So here's my toast," I said, my voice shaking with a fury so pure it felt like a religious experience. "To my new apartment, the one I paid for with my blood, my sweat, and my grandmother's memory, the one that I will own, alone. Because tomorrow morning, these recordings go to my lawyer, and we are going to file for an annulment on the grounds of fraud. We are going to present this evidence to a judge and have that fraudulent deed thrown out. And I am going to spend every last kopeck I have to make sure that you and your entire disgusting family are publicly humiliated." I held his terrified gaze for a beat longer, then deliberately, I let my wine glass slip from my fingers. It shattered on the stone patio, the sound as sharp and final as a slammed door. I turned my back on them all, on the wreckage of my marriage and the stunned, hateful faces of his family. I started walking towards the car, my heels crunching on the gravel driveway. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me, a mixture of shock, hatred, and fear. I had the recordings. I had the moral high ground. I had just declared war, and in my mind I had already won. I was halfway to the gate when I heard the sound of heavy footsteps running on the gravel behind me. It was Dmitri, Oleg's father. His face was contorted in a mask of pure rage. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh like talons. "You will not destroy my family, you little witch!" he snarled, his voice a low, guttural growl. "That recording is not going anywhere." He lunged for my pocket, his other hand reaching for the USB stick. But he wasn't just trying to grab it. In his hand, glinting malevolently in the dim light from the house, was a small, sharp-bladed garden knife. The cold, hard reality of the knife blade, pressed against the fabric of my pocket, sent a jolt of pure, primal fear through me. This wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't a legal battle. Dimitri's eyes were wild, bloodshot, the eyes of a cornered animal willing to do anything to protect its den. The shashlik party had devolved into a scene from a cheap, terrifying crime drama, and I was the star victim. "Give it to me," he hissed, his breath a foul mix of vodka and desperation. His grip on my arm was crushing, but fear has a strange alchemy. It can paralyze, or it can sharpen the mind to a razor's edge. As his fingers fumbled for the USB stick, a different recording played in my head. Anya's panicked voice on the phone. "They think I'm inside helping with the salads." Anya. My secret weapon wasn't just the recorder in my pocket. It was the second recorder, the one she had passed to me in the kitchen, which I had slipped into the pocket of my jacket, now lying on a chair on the veranda. But more importantly, it was Anya herself. "You think this is the only copy?" I spat, my voice laced with a bravado I didn't feel. I forced myself to meet his crazed gaze. "You think I'm that stupid? The moment I got here, I uploaded everything. It's in the cloud, Dmitri. Sent to my lawyer. sent to a journalist I know who loves stories about Moscow's elite behaving badly. You can take this little stick. You can cut me with your little knife. It won't change a thing. All it will do is add assault with a deadly weapon to the fraud charges. It was a complete and utter bluff. I hadn't uploaded a thing. But the conviction in my voice, the sheer audacity of the lie, gave him pause. His grip loosened just a fraction. It was the opening I needed. "Papa, no!" Oleg's voice, thin and reedy, cut through the tense silence. He was running towards us, stumbling in his drunken state, his face a mess of terror and confusion. He wasn't running to save me. He was running to save his father from doing something monumentally stupid. That brief distraction was everything. I twisted my body, yanking my arm from Dmitri's grasp with a surge of adrenaline. I didn't run. I turned and strode back towards the fire pit, back towards the silent, horrified audience. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs, but my steps were steady. I walked directly to the chair where I had left my jacket, my eyes never leaving Dmitri's stunned face. I reached into the pocket, my fingers closing around the second USB stick, Anya's recording. I held it up high for all to see. "As I was saying," I announced to the frozen tableau, my voice shaking only slightly, "there are always backups." I looked directly at Anya, who was huddled by the kitchen door, pale as a ghost. I gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was a signal. Get out. Now. Then I did something they never expected. I turned to Oleg, who had stopped a few feet away, looking utterly broken. I tossed the first USB stick, the one from my pocket, onto the ground at his feet. "Here," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "A souvenir of your victory. Go on, destroy the evidence. See how much good it does you." Dmitri lunged for it, snatching it off the gravel. For a moment, a wave of triumph washed over his face. He thought he'd won. He looked at the tiny piece of plastic in his hand as if it were the key to his family's salvation. He didn't realize it was a decoy. He didn't realize the real evidence was now securely in my fist. I didn't wait to see what they would do next. I turned my back on them for the final time and walked, not ran, to my car. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. The headlights cut a brilliant path through the darkness, illuminating Oleg's pathetic, defeated face for one last moment before I put the car in reverse. As I pulled away, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I am safe. I am at the bus stop. Thank you. A." The drive back to Moscow was a blur. The adrenaline slowly seeped away, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion and a hollow ache where my heart used to be. But beneath the pain, there was something else, a hard, cold sense of resolve. The next morning, I was in Mikhail's office. I placed Anya's USB stick on his desk. He listened to the recordings, his expression shifting from grim satisfaction to outright fury. He heard Irina's smug confession. He heard Oleg's drunken, whispered threat. He even heard Dmitri's violent ultimatum and my bluff. "He threatened you with a knife?" Mikhail asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "He did." "Good," he said, a chilling smile on his face. "That makes things much simpler." What followed was not the messy public spectacle I had threatened. Mikhail was more subtle, more lethal. He didn't file a lawsuit. He arranged a private meeting, just us, Oleg, his father, and their shell-shocked lawyer. In a sterile conference room, Mikhail didn't make arguments. He simply played the recordings. He played Irina admitting her knowledge of the fraud. He played Oleg admitting his plan to me. He played Dmitri threatening me. The color drained from their faces. Their lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. When the recordings finished, Mikhail let the silence hang in the air for a full minute before he spoke. "Here is what is going to happen," he said, his voice as cold as a Siberian winter. "Your son, Oleg, will sign a document immediately, relinquishing all claims to the Tsvetnoy Boulevard property and agreeing to an uncontested annulment. He will cite irreconcilable differences, No fraud will be mentioned, because my client is a kind and generous woman who does not wish to see him in prison." He paused, letting the threat land. "Furthermore, you, Dmitry Volkov, will transfer 5 million rubles to an account of my client's choosing. We will call it compensation for emotional distress. You will call it the price for keeping that third recording, the one involving a knife from the police." Dmitry looked like he was going to have a stroke, but his lawyer put a restraining hand on his arm and whispered furiously in his ear. Oleg just sat there, a hollowed-out shell of a man staring at his hands. He didn't even look at me. They signed. They signed everything. Within a week, the deed was solely in my name. The annulment was processed. The money appeared in my account. I never saw or heard from any of them again. I gave half the money to Anya, wiring it to an account in a different city. The last I heard, she had moved to St. Petersburg and was studying to be a graphic designer. She was finally free. Tonight, I am sitting on the floor of my living room. My living room. The smell of fresh paint is gone, replaced by the scent of books and coffee. The apartment is no longer an empty palace. It's a home, filled with my furniture, my art, my life. The keys feel different in my hand now, not heavy with sacrifice, but light with freedom. He boasted to his kin that he would divorce me and take half. Instead, he lost everything, and I found myself. And as I watch the glittering lights of Moscow from my window, I raise a glass, not a toast to revenge, but a toast to survival, a toast to the future, my future, and it looks absolutely perfect.